Well, got two people right off the bat. Is that Natty and Alex? One person leaving right away? Must have been an algorithm. Okay. So I'm going to share the screen. Please do, someone in the chat, let me know if it goes black. Sometimes it goes black when I try to share the screen. It's good. Yeah. Okay. So good. Look, Nat is number one fan again. Okay. So, since we've all been digesting, and are maybe we had a nap or what have you, a little sleepy, whatever the case may be, we are going to do a bit of study for our first evening session here, which I think is now late morning for you, Nat, or early afternoon. And what we're going to be looking at are the preconditions that are described in the great texts on meditation, as well as a few small additions from me. And these are the preconditions that are described for attaining full calm abiding midnight. Oh, goodness. So these are the preconditions described for attaining full calm abiding. So if you go through all 9 stages and you attain the 10th stage of actual full-blown calm abiding, these, as well as a few things I've added, are what are described as the absolutely necessary conditions in order for you to do that. Now, whether or not we want to actually attain full-blown calm abiding, I think it's still important to understand all of the conditions that are required to be successful, because this will help you understand why am I getting stuck, why am I not making progress, because these conditions, some of which are completely traditional and some of which are from my own insights, are the things that stop you from making progress. So let's begin. Precondition definition: that which must come before something else. So a condition you need before something else, right? So meditation, which is what we're practicing here, or calm abiding meditation, is result. It is the end result of putting together certain causes and conditions. So you can't practice the result, right? So this is a bit technical, but most of the time we say I'm practicing meditation, but in reality what we're doing is we're trying to do all the things that would lead to a state of meditation arising eventually. Technically, calm abiding doesn't occur until you achieve the 9th stage. As a matter of fact, until you have graduated from the 9th stage into actual calm abiding. So we're not actually practicing meditation. We are cultivating the causes and conditions that will produce meditation. And that whole process, of course, is incredible. And as some of you already know, you can experience unbelievable bliss and all of these things way before you've achieved calm abiding. And much more importantly, it's radically transformative for your individual life. even making a small amount of progress in meditative practice has huge effects on your psychology, and it's worth doing. So, in order to achieve the result that is stabilizing meditation, you need to do two things. You need to accumulate the causes and conditions, and you need to remove interfering conditions. What does that mean? Well, it's a bit like if you were trying to grow a garden. You need to plant the tomato in the garden, right? And the tomato will begin to grow. But then other things are going to start to grow, or there are going to be big trees blocking the light, or it'll be too windy, or there'll be pests, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to remove all the conditions that would stop the tomato from growing and provide all the conditions that will allow the tomato to grow. When the tomato plant gets big enough, it will produce the result that is the actual tomato. Likewise, we are growing the tomato plant through all of these practices, and we are doing our best to get the interfering conditions out of the way, and eventually it will produce the result of stabilizing meditation. Yes. So, if I'm not mistaken, traditionally they only list, in the Gelug tradition in particular, they only list 5 or 6 elements, but I have 10. So if there are any fellow Gelug practitioners watching, I apologize because you're going to be very confused. But don't be confused. This will make sense as we go. So the first thing that you need is to become fully informed. The big question is, what exactly are you doing, right? When you sit down to do your practice, what problems do you think you're going to encounter, and how do you overcome those problems? Furthermore, what is the whole process that you're going to be going in your training? Do you know when, for example, with regards to the 9 stages of training in calm abiding, do you know what the main problems are at each stage and what antidotes are required at each stage? And therefore, when you have accomplished each stage, will you know, aha, now it's time to apply a different antidote? If you don't know that, then you're relying upon someone else to tell you at every stage, oh, you're telling me this now. Probably what you need to do is X, Y, and Z, right? So the first thing you need to do, if you want to be more self-sufficient in your practice, is you need to become very, very well informed about what it is you're actually trying to do. Generally speaking, if you were trying to, you'd want to bring all the relevant texts, like the Bhavanakrama and the Lamrim Chenmo, anything else you would need for retreat in terms of information, you would need to bring that information with you. And this correlates with Venerable Vasubandhu, who's a very important Mahayana commentator from the Indian tradition. He says there are 5 obstacles to meditation. Confused about the instructions, right? If you don't know what you're supposed to do when you're training in concentration, you're never going to attain it. And therefore, I say the first thing you need to do is to become fully informed about your practice. Okay? The second thing that you need is proper motivation and intention. And I don't want to go through the full description of motivation and intention because it's quite long, but the obstacles was being confused about the instructions, but I put that first. So Vasubandhu's Treasury of Knowledge lists laziness as the second type of problem that you encounter in meditation. In other words, you know what to do now, right? And here's why I put it in this order. Let's say that you're fully informed about what to do for your practice, but then you don't have the motivation to do the practice. And there are people like this, like myself. I know what to do, I just don't want to do it, right? You don't want to exert in the practice. So again, for most of us, as I say here, this is the fault that we struggle with the most. So how do you overcome this fault? Before I overcome it in any detail, let's first just talk about general forms of laziness. So, in traditional text, there are about three, but I'm going to briefly talk about a few more. So, laziness is a very poor. Uh, it's much more detail in traditional texts, and it comes in traditional text. The first is basically you just don't want to do it. You have a disinclination to do it. The second is you think you can do it later. And the third is and maybe other people could accomplish these things, but you couldn't. Right? So disheartened or low self-esteem is the third type that's traditionally listed in these texts. So very briefly, um, whether or not laziness is a good translation of the terms in question, try to understand what's being said. If you were fully informed about how to meditate, the stages of meditation, the entire process from A to Z, the next problem you're going to have is that you just don't have the motivation to do it because it's not easy, it's painful, it's difficult, and you have to abandon other things for periods of time to get the work done. So one problem that you have is you're just not inclined to do it, right? You think about it and you go, yeah, I don't want to do that. Another related problem is that you sit down to do the practice, but you find that you're like so bored by the practice that you don't want to carry on with it, and so you don't do very much. Another is that you think, you know what? 3 weeks from now, when these things that are going on in my life right now, when those are all settled, 3 or 4 weeks from now, then get there. And we've all done this. 3 weeks goes by and you get there, and then there's 10 new problems that you have, and you go, okay. That retreat that I was going to do, I'll do that 2 months from now. Yeah, when these new problems are settled, to retreat. Right? And so we put it off and put it off and put it off. Related to procrastination is being too busy, right? A very modern problem where we have a million little projects we're doing and little commitments we've made, and I have to do this, and I've told people I'm a blah 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 blah, and we make so many little projects and commitments and things for ourselves to do that we get to the end of the day or whatever, and there's just no time. So so we don't meditate, right? I'm going to skip to this one. Disheartenment is a little bit different in flavor. Disheartenment means, for example, you look at the life story of Milarepa, and Milarepa spent years and years in caves across the Himalayas, meditating and attaining really rarefied, very difficult forms of meditation in the tantric tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. And we think to ourselves, those kinds of attainments, those are for people like Milarepa, special people, not for people like me. No matter how hard I work, I could never attain what Milarepa attained. So that way of thinking is called roughly called disheartenment or low self-esteem. Some reason that we just don't have the capacity to achieve the result. Embarrassment is one that I have noticed with a lot of modern practitioners. Frankly, we think of this stuff as being a little bit weird, you know? Like in, at a cocktail party or whatever, I don't know what kind of things you people are into. But, at a social gathering saying, "Oh yeah, I spent 10 hours over the last, every day over the last 5 days doing just sitting in my room with no social media on and no television, just staring at the ground. And so we can get a little bit embarrassed about all of the stuff that we need to do in order to be successful in these practices. The amount of time that it takes you have to make, the ethical commitments you need to make. It can, because other people don't understand what you're doing. So the laziness is maybe not the best word, but it translators have used for a long time, and it describes all of these things we from practicing. So the first fault, according to me, not according to Vasubandhu and other great saints, but according to me, you don't know how to meditate, you don't know the steps and stages, that will cause you to fail, period. Maybe you do know how to meditate, or someone's instructions, so you don't need to know all the steps and stages they're taking. But you have laziness to deal with. You put it off, you make yourself too busy, you're embarrassed, you think this, you kind of just don't want to do it, you get bored halfway through and quit, whatever. You put it off and say, oh, 3 weeks from now I'll do it. So those attitudes will stop you from succeeding. So how do you overcome all these attitudes? Well, they say is to have conviction. How do you? Well, you develop conviction that this is something worth doing by thoroughly understanding the subject. So you go back to point number one. If you thoroughly understand what meditation training is and what the benefits are in particular, then you'll be convinced, deeply convinced, that this is worth attaining. And just like anything else, like if you went to your doctor and your doctor said, hey, if you lose 30 pounds, your back pain will go away and all of your blood work will look better and your mind will be clearer and you'll get a $500,000 raise at work. Whatever. You'll marry a supermodel, whatever, right? If you were convinced there are tremendous benefits to something, then the next thing that happens naturally is you develop strong desire. You have strong desire to get that thing. If you think there's a lot of benefit to making $500,000 a year, and you think about it over and over and over and over and over again, pretty soon you're going to be doing things to try to get up to making $500,000 a year, aren't you? If you just sit around obsessing about how to do that, eventually you're going to take action to try to accomplish it. So same thing here. If you sit around studying, thinking about blah, 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 benefits of training in meditation and all the drawbacks of not training in meditation, so then you develop this aspiration. I want to do this, right? I want that. I want to attain that. And that aspiration leads to virya, leads to joyous effort. You can translate this word a number of different ways: persistence, perseverance, right? But I like, nobody translates it this way, but it's just enthusiasm. You have this like energized enthusiasm to engage in whatever it is you're doing. It's, I think that speaks for itself. So there's a deep connection between studying the subject and understanding what the benefits of meditation are and what the drawbacks are not succeeding in meditative training are, and then really wanting to attain the results of meditation, like powerfully, like deep desire to attain the results, and then having enthusiasm to actually do the training, right? There's a natural connection between these. Skipping through some things, then eventually you actually attain mental pliancy, and that by itself will cause you to continue training. Just the fact that mental pliancy is so awesome will cause you to continue your training. So I'm not going to go through all the benefits of comma biting, but I do actually have all of this. I do have some supplementary information as well from the Lamrim Chenmo and places that you can find more information on how to develop strong desire. So now thinking through it logically, let's say that you're fully informed, and now let's say you're fully motivated. What do you do next? You need a conducive environment in which to do the training. And this now brings us back to retreat. Yes? You need two boundaries that allow you to, in a practical sense, to progress in the training. And we've discussed these at some length, but there is a huge amount more information here which you can cover on your own. And what we're doing here in this retreat is really more like retreat in the middle of life. So again, I'll let you read that on your own, but environment to required for that actually is once you have some capability in terms of the practices that I've put forth for this series. Once you can do some foundation 1 through foundation 5, then you can just turn, as one of my most important personal mentors did, you can just turn ordinary life into the process of training. And so the boundary is internal primarily, not external. So you just enter a condition where you're turning more and more of your ordinary life into a process of struggle, of striving on the path, of deepening your experience, even though you're not in any kind of formal retreat. And because you're doing that, you naturally create certain barriers around your life, not in some kind of weird spiritual way, but in a practical way. You just don't engage in as much distracting activity, and you don't study a lot of stuff that doesn't advance progress on the path and so forth, because why would you do that? Carrying right along, as I discussed at the beginning of the retreat, one important element of being successful in meditation that seems totally counterintuitive in the beginning is keeping pure vows and ethics. Why is this important? Vows and ethics, you're cultivating all day long mental factors, mindfulness, and that you need to be successful in meditation. That's one element. Another element is the less you do, if you then you have chaos in your life. And that chaos will stop you from doing your practice. And more, all of the negative emotions and disturbing emotions you feel, like if you, I don't know, at your work, if you attacked somebody, you screamed at them. When you go home, you're like, oh man, what if I get fired? What if this happens? What if that happens? Oh, I can't believe I said this thing or that thing. And now all of a sudden your mind is completely disturbed. So when you engage in non-virtuous actions, other people come after you and try to mess up your life. Your emotions get out of control. Even, they're out of control to begin with, but they get more out of control. And then you feel regret and remorse, and also when you're not maintaining vows and ethics, you're not cultivating mindfulness and alertness from moment to moment. So keeping pure vows and ethics is very important. Fifth, having little desire, being satisfied with what one has. So, man, this sounds so simple, and I've only have one little paragraph on it, but man, this is maybe the most difficult thing. If you were going to enter a retreat and there were attendants who were going to bring you the food you needed and whatever, and there are organizations that can for a year or something, and you had a proper teacher who said, yes, this would be good for you, and blah, blah, blah. Uh, Very difficult to do. So you should actively work to eliminate thoughts that in order to be happy, you must have the very best food, clothing, place to live, etc. Now, you need a house that doesn't smell like a neighborhood that isn't filled with crime where people are actually trying to harm you, and practical concerns aside, all these normal practical things like your health to death, okay? But you should be slowly working on and eliminating the feeling that, for me, in order to be happy, I have to have the very best, not just bananas, I have to have the very best bananas. What if among the 7 different kinds of bananas on the market, which one have the highest, the most antioxidants? You know, this one potassium. It's like, okay, you know, you can spend an entire lifetime thinking about food, the very best clothing, perfume, the very best place to live, blah, blah. You have to reduce that dramatically if you want to be successful in meditation. Sixth, avoid the disturbance caused by being involved in many activities. So, once again, this is mainly aimed at people doing full time retreat. So, if you were in full time retreat for 2 weeks or a month or whatever, you should avoid all of these activities that basically only make the mind more excited. They're only adding excitement, the mental factor of excitement to the helping you cultivate the meditative attainments that you set out to attain in the retreat. So it's a bit, if you go into long-term retreat, it's like being an Olympic athlete. You wake up, you eat, piss and shit, winning Olympic gold in distance running, right? There's nothing else. And everything else is a distraction. uh, Now, for us more ordinary people who are maintaining careers and relationships and exercise, we should do our best to transform each of these activities as much as we can into something that supports our mind training activity. And there's a lot more on that in other parts of the course materials. But in brief, your career, try not to have a career where you're hurting other people. Have a career where you do the minimum harm to other people, and ideally that it's others. Yeah. So if your career involves a lot of lying or a lot of killing or involves stealing or whatever, then, you don't have to just quit your job and starve to death, but maybe start looking for a career where you don't have to do that, where you don't have to steal, you don't have to kill, you don't have to harm others, because this creates not only negative karma, but it creates obstacles to your meditation practice. Your relationships. This surprises people quite often when I say it, but you need to have a good relationship with, as best you can, kind of conventional good relationships with parents, with your spouse, your kids, and when you so forth in the Buddhist canon, they describe those sorts of things. Work out the conflicts you have with other people, and really do try to make the relationships you have with others that are interpersonal into nice relationship. Why? Well, first of all, it's good karma, merit, blah blah blah, the whole Buddhist thing. But also, it's just nice. It's nice to have a good relationship with the people around you, and your mind is more at ease. If your mind is more at ease, you can do more practice and deeper practice in terms of training and meditation. Exercise, so Tai Chi, yoga, A lot of yoga, though, they put on a bunch of music and incense and blah, blah, blah. And that's probably not the best, but if it's what you got, it's what you got. Having some type of exercise that makes the body comfortable is important. You need a comfortable body, as I'll cover later, in order to be able to make progress in your practice. Uh, if the body is not relatively comfortable, it's very difficult to make progress in meditation. And then even your hobbies. So if you have hobbies that are involved in the arts or sports or whatever, do your best to apply mind training principles to your hobbies, etc. Basically, if you don't transform as best you can your work, your family life, your social life, athletics, artistic endeavors into some type of deliberate, mindful practice where you're trying to transform your mind through the activity, then there's just not enough time in a human lifetime to make really profound progress in your practice. Now, of course, I'm giving you techniques that allow you to bring more and more mind training into all of these things, like Foundation 4, opening the sense gates, you can bring into every single one of these things. Foundations 2 and 3, you can bring into at least half of these things part of the time, where you're either standing or you're walking. So, and then rumination meditation, you can do all the time. So, the more you train and the more disciplined your mind gets, the so I'm just checking to make sure everyone's still here. Good. So the more disciplined your mind gets, and the more you train, the more your activities, your ordinary activities, are just naturally transformed into practice. Because how you are, you remember when I was talking about the boat analogy, if your practice is sort of like a tide that is rising and falling, as you make more progress, the boat is just sort of resting higher all the time. And that's helping to maintain the tide of your practice, if I may. And so by the time you get back to the cushion, the tide is still pretty high. And now you're adding even more water to the harbor. And then while you're in between sessions, the tide is so high that your activities are already being transformed by the way that your mind is because of the practice you've done more formally. And therefore, by the time you get back to the cushion, the tide has remained pretty high. So the boat is, in theory, as best you can, rising all the time. You see what I mean? Right. And we'll pick it up with point number 7 after the break. So we'll be back at 4 o'clock. Okay? See you soon.